Hi, boys and girls. So we are now going to be doing our next reading lesson. And so today's lesson is called Oh, What a Tangled Web. Plot lines and problems begin to multiply. So overall, we're going to be talking about the plot line of a story and how sometimes in fantasy novels, they can get a little bit complicated because sometimes there's more than one plot line, sometimes there's multiple problems, there's a lot of stuff going on. So, how can we keep track of that and organize ourselves so that we're understanding everything happening in the story? So, that's kind of the point of today's lesson. So here's our teaching point. Readers, as you tackle more and more complicated books, the stories will begin to have multiple plot lines. This means that the main characters will have more than one problem, and that problems will arise for other characters too. And it also means that the problems will not all be resolved at the end of the story. So that means sometimes they're not all fixed by the end. Often readers find it helpful to use charts, timelines, and other graphic organizers to track the problems that arise in a story in order to follow the multiple plot lines. So I'm going to be showing you guys today how we can use a graphic organizer to keep our information organized and keep track of our story. All right, so for a second, I want you to pause this video just for a minute and try to jot down or name out loud all the problems that Percy and his friends have by now. What have they entailed? What are some problems that they've had? So pause it and think about that for a second. It's a lot, right? I bet you can't even name all of them. So here's my list that I came up with in that minute that we paused the video. So here's some problems that we've seen so far. Percy's math teacher turned into a demon. Percy is confused because everyone seems to have forgotten Mrs. Dodds. Grover is supposed to take care of Percy, and Percy is attacked. Percy ditches Grover at the bus station and doesn't tell his mom any of what happened. Percy's mom has tried to keep him safe, but he keeps getting in trouble and danger at boarding schools. Percy tries to save his mom, and she is caught by the Minotaur and vanishes. Percy doesn't know who his father is. So these are just a few. It doesn't mean that, these are all the problems, but these are the ones I could think of in the time that I gave you. So I'm noticing, though, that some of these problems are connected, and some of them are problems that were resolved by another problem. For example, when Grover is trying to protect Percy, but Percy thought he was acting weird, right? So he ditched him, and then he got into even more danger. So he was solving a problem, but then kind of getting himself into even more problems. So instead of just jotting down notes, I figured that maybe we could try to organize it a little bit better and create a chart that will help us kind of keep track. So it might get a little messy as the story goes on, and that's okay. That's how stories are. So here's what I've got for my graphic organizer. I have my list of characters here. I have the different problems I've seen, the actions that the characters have taken, and whether or not these problems were resolved and how they were resolved. So just to kind of go over it, for example, the problem that I listed earlier, that the math teacher turned into a demon, right? So this was Percy's problem, so that's why he's the character Percy. That's his problem. What did he do about it? He fought and defeated the demon with Mr. Brunner's help. And was that problem resolved? Yes or no? You could put yes. Everyone seems to think that Mrs. Dodds never existed. So even though the problem, I would say, is resolved because he defeated her, there's still that other problem that now everybody doesn't know what he's talking about whenever he brings up Mrs. Dodds. So these two are kind of connected because now Percy has another problem that he's confused. Why did everyone else forget about Mrs. Dodds? Why are people thinking, he's nuts when he brings her up? So he drops a hint with Grover. That's what he does. He says, "Hey, is this a thing? Was she even real?" And Percy thinks that Grover remembers, but he's still confused. So Grover was still kind of being wishy-washy about it and not really admitting it. So that problem that I said earlier in my list for Grover, he tries to take care of Percy, but he's attacked by Mrs. Dodds. So Grover tries to convince Percy to stay with him on the way home. Is the problem resolved? Percy is alarmed by the way Grover is acting, so he ditches him at the bus station. So kind of avoids that problem by running away and creates a bigger problem for himself. Percy, his problem that he was alarmed by Grover's behavior and everything that was happening, but doesn't want to tell his mom. So remember when he got home and he didn't really speak up right away to his mom about what was going on? He didn't tell her what was happening. So what happens? Percy and his mom are attacked at Montauk and they have to run for their lives. Percy realizes it would have been better if he had told his mom in the first place. So thinking about with the resolution so far, there hasn't been like fixes to the problem, but there's some type of resolution to this is what happens because of this, because of this. You know, this is kind of where it ends up. And we might not see some of these problems really resolved until later on in the story, or maybe not even till the end. So Percy's mom, Sally, her problem is that she knows Percy's in danger, so she sent him to boarding school, but danger finds Percy anyway. So this is kind of the result of what happens because of her issue that she tried to fix, she tried to resolve, but he still ends up with a dangerous situation. And the last one has Percy. He doesn't know who his father is, right? And so we've had some hints dropped in the last couple chapters. And then we did find out in this last chapter that we read, I think it was chapter 8, that he tried to talk to his mom about it. He participates in the Camp Half-Blood things, even though he doesn't know who his father is. But he notices that these like weird things keep happening around waters, like the stuff with the toilets and the things that happen in the ponds. Like different things happen where he's like, wait a second, like water is something that I can control. So that gave him a hint as to who his father is, who is Poseidon. Poseidon claims Percy as his son. So he finally resolves that problem of figuring out who his dad is. So hopefully this chart will help you guys in your reading of your own fantasy books. So that takes us to what your job is today. So now what you're going to do is you're going to read for your 30 minutes that you should be doing every day, your independent reading time, and you're reading a fantasy book, whether it's on Epic or a book you have at home. And you're going to fill in a graphic organizer that I attached to this lesson. I was thinking about doing it in your notebook, but I feel like having a graphic organizer already set up for you, I think that'll be a little bit easier. So I just made one for you, okay? So you should also keep in mind while you're reading that you should notice that not all problems will be resolved. Some of those stuff are kind of put on the back burner and might not be resolved till later in the book or might not be resolved at all. Sometimes that happens. And think about too how sometimes a character's solution to a problem can sometimes create another problem. And sometimes it's a different character's problem. So keep track of that as well if you can. So as you're reading these complicated books, the problems and conflicts are going to get a lot more complicated and tangled up. So I want you guys to just try practicing, using a graphic organizer, these charts, to help you keep track of what is going on in your books. All right. So now that's kind of the end of this lesson, but you're not done yet. Now you need to go read for 30 minutes and do that graphic organizer that I attached to this lesson. The graphic organizer looks a lot like the one that I just did and showed you in this lesson. All right, so message me if you guys have any questions. If you need any help, let me know.